You still think power belongs to the talented, the moral, the deserving. That belief exposes you. Power is taken by colder minds while you wait for permission. You were taught a comforting lie, a lie repeated by teachers, managers, institutions, and the obedient masses who benefit from believing it. They told you that power rises naturally to the talented, that leadership belongs to the most competent, that integrity, loyalty, and hard work eventually place you at the top. History quietly disagrees. Look closely at the structure of power across centuries. Kings were not chosen because they were wise. Generals were not followed because they were kind. Rulers did not ascend because they were morally superior. They rose because they understood something most people refuse to accept. Power is not awarded. Power is seized, constructed, and defended. This is the first fracture in the illusion. Most people spend their entire lives behaving as if the world operates like a fair competition. They improve their skills, they prove their loyalty, they demonstrate reliability. They assume the system will eventually recognize their value. But power structures are not meritocracies. They are arenas. And arenas reward a completely different set of behaviors. In an arena, the person who hesitates loses. The person who waits for validation remains invisible. The person who insists on fairness becomes predictable. Predictable people are easy to control. This is why the majority remain permanently outside the circles of real authority. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack capability, but because they refuse to abandon the comforting idea that power must be deserved. Machiavelli observed this centuries ago. While others debated ethics and virtue, he studied something far more dangerous: the mechanics of rule. He watched rulers rise and collapse. He examined why some men commanded armies while others begged for recognition. His conclusion was brutally simple. Men who rely on virtue are ruled by those who rely on strategy. This does not mean morality disappears from the game of power. Morality becomes something else entirely: a tool. Powerful individuals rarely reject morality openly. That would create resistance. Instead, they display morality when it benefits them and abandon it when it becomes inconvenient. To the public, they appear honorable. Behind the structure of power, they operate with calculation. This duality is what separates rulers from followers. The follower wants to be seen as good. The ruler wants to remain in control. These goals are rarely compatible. Observe any hierarchy long enough and the pattern becomes clear. The individuals who climb fastest are rarely the most transparent. They reveal little. They hesitate less. They understand that perception is more powerful than truth. And most importantly, they are not waiting for permission. The majority of people, however, remain psychologically dependent on approval. They wait to be invited. They wait to be recognized. They wait to be promoted. They wait for someone higher in the hierarchy to acknowledge their worth. While they wait, others move. Those who acquire power understand something deeply uncomfortable. The structure of authority is full of gaps. Vacuums appear constantly. Moments when leadership is uncertain, decisions are delayed, or responsibility is avoided. Most people retreat from these moments. They fear being wrong. They fear criticism. They fear standing alone. The power seeker moves directly into that vacuum. Not because they are fearless, because they understand a fundamental truth. Authority often belongs to whoever acts first. This is why power rarely appears fair. The individual who steps forward during chaos becomes the leader simply because everyone else hesitated. Once authority is assumed, it begins to solidify. People prefer certainty. They prefer direction. They prefer believing that someone is in control, even if that control was initially taken, not granted. This is the hidden architecture of power. It is not built from fairness, talent, or loyalty. It is built from perception, timing, and the willingness to act while others are still negotiating with their conscience. Most people sense this truth but immediately reject it. Accepting it would require abandoning the identity they have built around being agreeable, trustworthy, and morally consistent. But power rarely belongs to the agreeable. It belongs to those who understand that the world is not organized like a classroom. It is organized like a battlefield. And on battlefields, the rules are not written by the virtuous. They are written by those who win. Power does not begin with strength. It begins with perception. Before anyone follows you, fears you, or obeys you, they must first decide, often unconsciously, that you occupy a higher position in the invisible hierarchy that governs human behavior. This hierarchy is not written, it is felt. Humans constantly scan their environment for signals of dominance, certainty, and threat. Long before logic appears, instinct begins ranking people. Who speaks with authority? Who hesitates? Who looks comfortable taking control? The moment these signals appear, the mind quietly assigns status. And once status is assigned, behavior changes. People defer. They comply. They hesitate to challenge. This is the first hidden mechanism of power, the manipulation of perception. Most people attempt to earn influence through explanation. They justify their ideas. They try to persuade others with logic and evidence. They believe authority comes from proving they are correct. But authority rarely emerges from proof. It emerges from certainty. A person who speaks calmly, decisively, and without visible doubt often appears more powerful than someone presenting flawless logic but seeking approval. The crowd rarely follows the most accurate voice. They follow the most certain one. Machiavelli understood this dynamic centuries ago. A ruler could not afford to appear uncertain even when uncertainty existed. Doubt weakens the psychological structure of authority. Confidence reinforces it. But perception alone is not enough. Power also depends on a second mechanism: controlled unpredictability. Predictable individuals are safe to challenge. Their reactions can be anticipated. Their limits are visible. Unpredictable individuals are dangerous. When people cannot easily predict your reactions, they instinctively become cautious. They hesitate before opposing you because the consequences are unclear. This hesitation is a form of power. It does not require violence or aggression. It requires strategic ambiguity. The powerful rarely reveal everything they think. They do not display every emotion. They do not announce every intention. Instead, they allow silence and uncertainty to do the work. Silence forces others to fill the space with their own assumptions. And the mind, when faced with uncertainty, often imagines consequences far worse than reality. This is why controlled silence is one of the most underestimated tools of authority. The man who speaks constantly reveals his boundaries. The man who observes quietly becomes difficult to measure. And what cannot be measured cannot be easily challenged. The third mechanism of power is emotional pressure. Human beings are profoundly uncomfortable with tension. We prefer harmony. We prefer predictable social environments where everyone understands their place. Powerful individuals understand this discomfort and use it strategically. A well-timed pause, a cold look, a refusal to respond immediately. These small disruptions create psychological pressure inside others. The mind begins searching for ways to restore stability. Often the easiest way to restore stability is simple: obedience. People comply not because they are forced, but because obedience removes tension. This is the invisible architecture beneath many power structures.
Leaders who appear calm while others feel uncertain automatically gain leverage. Their composure becomes interpreted as control. Their silence becomes interpreted as calculation. Over time, these perceptions reinforce themselves. Others begin treating them as powerful. And the more they are treated as powerful, the more their authority solidifies. This process rarely happens consciously. Most followers believe they are responding rationally. In reality, they are responding to a series of subtle signals that trigger ancient instincts about hierarchy and survival. Those who understand this mechanism can shape it. They manage what others see. They control what others hear. And most importantly, they control what others cannot predict. This is why power rarely belongs to the most expressive or transparent individual.
Power rarely belongs to one personality. History shows something more precise. Those who consistently rise to positions of authority tend to fall into a small number of behavioral patterns. Different temperaments, different styles, but the same ruthless relationship with control. They are predators within the hierarchy. Not violent, not chaotic, but acutely aware that power is a game of positioning, timing, and psychological leverage. 3 archetypes appear again and again across empires, corporations, political movements, and even ordinary social circles. The strategist, the opportunist, and the silent dominator. Most people recognize these figures only after they have already taken control, but once you see the patterns, they become impossible to ignore. The first predator is the strategist. The strategist rarely rushes. He studies structures before touching them. He maps alliances, weaknesses, rivalries, and hidden motivations. While others compete openly, he observes the entire battlefield. Where others see individuals, the strategist sees networks. He understands that power is rarely seized directly. It is assembled quietly through positioning. Relationships are cultivated, favors are remembered, loyalties are tested over time. When the moment arrives, the strategist rarely fights for power. He simply steps into a structure he has already built. This is why strategists often appear calm during moments of chaos. Their moves were calculated long before the opportunity became visible. To outsiders, their rise looks sudden. In reality, it was engineered. The second predator is the opportunist. Where the strategist waits, the opportunist moves fast. He thrives in instability. When systems collapse, when leaders hesitate, when uncertainty spreads, he advances without hesitation. Most people retreat from chaos. The opportunist runs toward it. He understands a brutal principle. Power vacuums appear during disorder. When no one wants responsibility, whoever takes it becomes the authority by default. Opportunists do not wait for perfect plans. They move with incomplete information. They improvise. They adapt. This makes them extremely dangerous in volatile environments. While others debate whether they should act, the opportunist has already acted. And once someone occupies the seat of authority, removing them becomes far more difficult than preventing them from reaching it. The third predator is the most misunderstood, the silent dominator. Unlike the strategist or the opportunist, the silent dominator rarely announces his presence. He does not chase leadership positions. He does not aggressively compete for attention. Instead, he projects something far more unsettling, unshakable composure. In every hierarchy, there are individuals who speak frequently, seek approval, and perform confidence loudly. The silent dominator does the opposite. He reveals little. He reacts slowly. He speaks only when necessary.
This controlled restraint creates an unusual psychological effect. People begin projecting authority onto him. Silence forces others to interpret, and the human mind often interprets silence as depth, calculation, or hidden strength. Soon others begin seeking his opinion. They watch his reactions carefully. They adjust their behavior around him. Without openly claiming power, he gradually becomes the gravitational center of the group. The strategist builds structures. The opportunist conquers moments. The silent dominator controls presence. These archetypes operate differently, but they share a common rule. None of them rely on fairness. They do not assume loyalty will protect them. They do not assume competence guarantees authority. They do not assume morality determines leadership. Instead, they treat power as something that must be managed continuously. This is the difference between those who study power and those who simply hope to receive it. The average person waits to be recognized. The predators of hierarchy recognize something colder. Recognition usually follows control, not the other way around. Once authority is established, people begin rewriting history. They reinterpret events to justify the leader's position. They call him competent, visionary, deserving. But those labels appear after the victory. Power first, justification later. This is why the ruthless rulers rarely obsess over being liked. Approval is unstable. It disappears the moment pressure rises. Control is different. Control reshapes the environment itself. And the individuals who understand this truth rarely look like villains when they rise. They simply look inevitable. Most people claim they want moral leaders. They praise kindness. They celebrate fairness. They speak passionately about honesty, humility, and integrity. But watch what they actually follow. The pattern becomes uncomfortable. Again and again, across centuries, across cultures, across every form of hierarchy, humans gravitate towards individuals who project something colder than virtue. They follow certainty. They follow strength. And, when necessary, they follow fear. This contradiction sits at the center of human nature. Civilization teaches people to speak the language of morality. Society rewards those who publicly defend fairness and compassion. These ideals create order, stability, and cooperation. But beneath this civilized layer lies an older psychological structure. One shaped long before laws, institutions, or modern ethics existed. For most of human history, survival depended on following individuals who could protect the group from danger. Those individuals were rarely chosen for their kindness. They were chosen for their ability to act decisively when violence or chaos appeared. The tribe followed whoever looked capable of controlling the threat, and that instinct never disappeared. Modern society may appear civilized, but the underlying psychology remains intact. In moments of uncertainty, people instinctively search for the individual who appears most capable of restoring control. Not the most compassionate, the most decisive. This is why ruthless leaders repeatedly rise during periods of instability. While others hesitate, debate, or seek consensus, the ruthless leader presents something the crowd desperately wants: clarity, a clear enemy, a clear direction, a clear structure of authority, even if that clarity is partially constructed. Humans fear uncertainty more than harsh leadership. A strict ruler who appears in control feels safer than a moral leader who looks uncertain. The mind interprets decisiveness as protection, even when that decisiveness comes from calculated manipulation. Machiavelli observed this pattern with brutal honesty. He noticed that people often forgive cruelty if it produces order, but they rarely forgive weakness if it produces chaos. This is why rulers throughout history have understood a dangerous truth. Fear, when carefully managed, can stabilize authority faster than affection. Affection is fragile. It depends on approval. It depends on consistent emotional satisfaction. Fear is different. Fear changes behavior immediately. When individuals believe disobedience carries consequences, their actions become predictable. Boundaries become clear. The hierarchy solidifies. But Machiavelli did not advocate uncontrolled brutality. That would destroy the structure of power entirely. Instead, he described something more precise: calculated ruthlessness. Cruelty applied strategically, not emotionally. A ruler who punishes unpredictably appears unstable, but a ruler who punishes decisively and rarely creates something more powerful than violence. He creates reputation. Reputation spreads faster than force. Once people believe a leader is capable of ruthless action, the leader often no longer needs to demonstrate it. The image alone becomes enough to maintain control. This is how power structures sustain themselves, through perception, memory, and quiet psychological pressure. Most individuals within a hierarchy begin regulating their own behavior. They avoid crossing invisible lines. They anticipate consequences before they occur. The leader no longer needs constant enforcement. The system begins enforcing itself. This is the silent efficiency of calculated authority.
The greatest obstacle to power is not your enemies. It is your need to be accepted. From childhood, most people are conditioned to seek approval. Good behavior is rewarded with praise. Obedience earns validation. Cooperation is celebrated as virtue. Over time, this conditioning becomes identity. You learn to measure yourself by how others react to you. You adjust your behavior to maintain harmony. You soften your opinions, explain your decisions, and reveal your intentions so that others feel comfortable. This works perfectly in environments designed for cooperation. It fails completely in environments defined by power. Because approval creates dependence. If your behavior is guided by the need to be liked, then your decisions will always be constrained by the reactions of others. You will hesitate when action might cause discomfort. You will soften your position when resistance appears. And hesitation is the signal of someone who can be controlled. Those who operate inside power structures understand this immediately. They recognize the approval seeker by his language and behavior. He explains too much. He apologizes too quickly. He reveals his thoughts before decisions are finalized. In other words, he exposes himself. Transparency may be virtuous in friendship, but it is dangerous in competition. When others understand exactly what you think, exactly what you feel, and exactly what you plan to do, they gain something extremely valuable: predictability. Predictable individuals can be manipulated easily. Their reactions are known in advance. Their boundaries are visible. Their motivations are clear. The strategist inside any hierarchy quietly studies these patterns and then uses them. The strategic shift toward power begins the moment approval stops guiding your behavior. Not because you become hostile or aggressive, but because you become independent of emotional validation. This independence creates distance. You begin speaking less, not out of shyness, but out of calculation. Words reveal information, and information gives others leverage. You begin observing more. Every hierarchy contains signals, alliances, insecurities, hidden rivalries. Those who speak constantly miss these signals. Those who watch quietly collect them. You begin responding slower. Most people react immediately to tension. They rush to explain themselves, defend their reputation, or correct misunderstandings. The strategist does the opposite.
He allows silence to remain in the room. Silence creates discomfort. It forces others to reveal more than they intended. They attempt to fill the gap with additional explanations, apologies, or concessions. While they speak, you learn. While they react, you remain composed. This composure becomes interpreted as control, and control is the currency of power. Another shift occurs in how you handle reputation. The approval seeker attempts to manage his reputation directly. He explains his intentions, defends his character, and tries to correct every misunderstanding. The strategist understands something colder. Reputation is not controlled through explanation. It is controlled through consistent behavior under pressure. When you remain calm during conflict, people assume strength. When you refuse to chase approval, people begin adjusting their behavior toward you instead. Gradually, the hierarchy reorganizes itself. People who once treated you casually become cautious. They observe your reactions more carefully. They begin measuring their words. Nothing dramatic happens, but the balance shifts. This is the quiet transition from approval to control. Control does not mean dominating every conversation or forcing others into submission. That behavior often signals insecurity. True control operates more subtly. It shapes the psychological atmosphere of a room. When you enter an environment without seeking validation, others feel it. When your reactions remain measured, others become careful. When your words are limited but precise, they carry more weight. Power often grows through these small adjustments, not through confrontation, but through presence. Machiavelli understood that rulers must learn to detach themselves from the emotional expectations of the crowd. A leader obsessed with approval becomes hostage to public opinion. A leader focused on control shapes the opinion instead. This does not require cruelty. It requires independence. The independence to make decisions without announcing them prematurely. The independence to remain calm when others become emotional. The independence to allow misunderstanding if correcting it would weaken your position. Most people never make this shift. They remain trapped in the invisible need to be accepted by everyone around them. But the moment approval stops controlling your behavior, something changes. You stop negotiating for position and begin occupying it. Power demands a burial, not of your ambition, not of your intelligence, but of something far deeply rooted, your harmless identity. For most of your life, you were trained to survive socially by becoming predictable. You learned to be agreeable, transparent, and emotionally available. These traits made you easier to trust, easier to include, easier to control. And that last part was never accidental. Harmless people stabilize hierarchies. They follow rules, avoid conflict, and rarely disrupt existing power structures. Institutions quietly encourage this identity because it keeps the machine running smoothly. But the harmless identity comes with a hidden cost. It prevents you from becoming dangerous. And in the arena of power, harmlessness is a liability. A person who cannot threaten the structure can never control it. This does not mean violence. It means psychological threat. The kind of presence that makes others uncertain about how far you might go, what you might reveal, or how firmly you will defend your position. Harmless individuals remove that uncertainty. They explain themselves openly. They forgive quickly. They reveal their limits. Everyone knows where they stand and how far they're willing to go. Once your limits are visible, you become manageable. Others know exactly how much pressure they can apply before you retreat. The individual who acquires power operates differently. He understands that authority requires a certain degree of strategic opacity. Not cruelty, not recklessness, but controlled unpredictability. This begins with the death of your previous social self, the version of you that needed everyone to feel comfortable. The version that rushed to clarify misunderstandings, the version that believed being good guaranteed respect. That version cannot survive inside real power structures, because power environments test boundaries constantly. Every hierarchy contains individuals looking for weakness, small signals that reveal who can be pushed, who can be ignored, and who must be treated carefully. The harmless identity fails every test. It compromises early. It explains too much. It absorbs pressure to maintain harmony. And harmony in power structures often means submission. The transformation required is uncomfortable because it changes how others experience you. You speak less freely. You reveal less emotion. You stop announcing every intention. To some people, this feels cold. But coldness is not the goal. Control is. Control over your reactions, control over your information, control over the psychological space you occupy. When others cannot fully read you, they become cautious. They begin analyzing your silence instead of exploiting your transparency. Your presence shifts. You become less socially convenient, but more strategically significant. People start measuring their behavior around you. They watch for your reaction before making certain moves. They consider how their decisions might affect your position. This is the moment the harmless identity truly dies, because you no longer exist in the hierarchy as someone who must be accommodated. You exist as someone who must be considered. And that difference changes everything. Machiavelli understood that rulers must learn to behave differently from ordinary men. If a leader behaves exactly like everyone else, equally transparent, equally agreeable, equally predictable, then nothing separates him from those he intends to lead. Authority requires distinction, not always louder, often simply harder to penetrate. This is why many individuals who rise to power begin appearing more reserved over time. They understand that information, emotion, and accessibility are forms of currency, and currency must be managed carefully. The harmless identity spends everything immediately. The powerful identity invests selectively. This transformation does not make you less human, but it does make you less available to manipulation, and that alone changes how the hierarchy responds to you. Once people sense that the agreeable version of you has disappeared, they adjust their
Power is never finished. This is the final truth most people refuse to accept. They imagine power as a destination, a summit where struggle ends and authority becomes permanent. Once a person rises high enough, they believe control stabilizes and the battle disappears. But power does not reward comfort. The moment you believe your position is secure, the erosion begins. Every hierarchy contains individuals studying the structure above them, watching carefully, waiting patiently, searching for the smallest fracture in authority. Weakness rarely arrives loudly. It begins with small signals. A leader who becomes predictable, a ruler who becomes overly trusting, a strategist who begins believing his reputation alone will protect him. Reputation is powerful, but it is also temporary. Fear fades, respect weakens, loyalty shifts. Time slowly dissolves every structure that stops adapting. This is why Machiavelli warned rulers about the most dangerous moment in their rise, not the struggle for power, but the period after it is achieved. Victory creates complacency. The mind begins relaxing its vigilance, decisions become slower, boundaries soften, former rivals are treated as harmless. And this is precisely when the next challenger begins moving, because power attracts challengers the way territory attracts predators. Once authority exists, someone will always want it. Some will attack openly, others will undermine quietly. Some will wait years before making their move, but the attempt will come.
This is the final law of power. Control must be maintained continuously. The ruler who survives is not the one who rises the fastest. It is the one who remains alert long after others believe the battle is over. This vigilance does not mean constant aggression. A paranoid ruler destroys his own stability. Fear without strategy leads to chaos. Instead, power must operate like a disciplined guard, always watching, always adjusting, always aware that the environment is changing. The most effective leaders maintain authority through 3 silent disciplines. First, adaptation. Circumstances evolve, allies change loyalties, opportunities appear in unexpected places. A rigid ruler eventually collapses under pressure, but the leader who adapts remains difficult to replace. Second, controlled distance. Powerful individuals never become completely absorbed by their inner circle. Familiarity weakens authority. When people feel too comfortable around a leader, boundaries begin dissolving. Distance preserves respect. Third, selective ruthlessness. A leader who never punishes invites defiance, but a leader who punishes constantly creates rebellion. The balance lies in strategic enforcement, rare, decisive actions that remind the hierarchy where the limits exist. Once the boundary is reinforced, order often restores itself. This discipline transforms power from something fragile into something enduring. Most people never reach this stage because they remain trapped in the earlier illusions that competence will protect them, that kindness guarantees loyalty, that fairness creates stability. But power does not operate on comfort. It operates on awareness. Awareness of human nature, awareness of shifting alliances, awareness that authority is never permanent. The strategist who understands this does not fear the constant movement of power. He expects it, and expectation creates preparation. Preparation creates resilience. This is the difference between those who briefly touch power and those who truly understand it. One treats power like a prize, the other treats it like a discipline that never sleeps, a discipline that never assumes safety, a discipline that quietly watches the room long after everyone else believes the game is finished. Because the final lesson of power is brutally simple. If you stop studying the structure, someone else already is.